And welcome to Mobile, Alabama. Southern Miss atop of the University of Southern Miss athletics for the weekend as they win the 2022 LendingTree Bowl here in Mobile, Alabama, 38-24, behind probably one of the greatest, if not most incredible, most astonishing performance you will ever see in this sport. I don't care who you're watching. Frank Gore Jr., official stat line, 21 carries, 329 yards, 2 touchdowns, a passing touchdown for 19 yards. So that is a Southern Miss single-game rushing record. That is the NCAA rushing record for bowl games, and I don't think you could really say anything other than astonishing, stunning, incredible, unbelievable.
You better get your thesaurus out for this one because there's not enough adjectives you can use about Frank Gore's performance. Not only those, but also the best rushing performance of the season by any player. And I don't have the numbers in front of me, but probably the best it's been in a long time. He really stepped up when they needed him most. The third quarter, Southern Miss really fell apart. They gave up 3 quick touchdowns to Rice, surrendered a 14-point halftime lead. And what did they do? They leaned on Frank Gore Jr., I'd say their best player, and he really took over from there. It seemed like every time they got him the ball, he was just bursting through the hole with great effort, and they got the ball up 7 at their own 43 or 44 yard line. One play right up the gut, got the rushing record on a 56-yard touchdown, and more importantly, sealed the victory in the LendingTree Bowl for the Golden Eagles. What a performance.
Austin, there's really nothing you can say. I mean, it's just unbelievable.
Of course, and Jackson talked about thesaurus, and I have one word out of my thesaurus to describe Frank Gore. Dog. He simply had a phenomenal night, guys. 329, we stated before, but he did absolutely everything that Southern Miss wanted and needed. Especially, I've never seen a never seen a performance like this ever in my experience covering Southern Miss or just completely just watching Southern Miss football. This was phenomenal, guys. You couldn't ask for a better game. Truly a historic night for Frank Gore Jr. and the Southern Miss Golden Eagles, winning their first bowl game since 2016.
Yeah, I mean, you're not even talking about Southern Miss at this point. You're talking about just an incredible performance. You know, you think of like Jackson Smith and Jigba's unbelievable performance in the Rose Bowl, and you think about Tua scoring a touchdown against Georgia in the national title game a couple years ago. You just think of Vince Young in the national title game a couple years ago, or several years ago. You just think of amazing moments in college football, and you can really just compare that. I mean, we're never going to see anything like that again. I mean, that was incredible, and nothing but props to Frank Gore Jr. Let's kind of shift focus to the game just a little bit. Southern Miss comes out, opening drive right down the field. It looked like it was bread and butter. Took the opening lead. Good ball from Trey Lowe tonight. Good play from Trey Lowe tonight. He really didn't do anything. Had that weird altercation that kind of, like you mentioned, Jackson, got Rice back in the game there in the third quarter. But they bounced back. But Trey Lowe played fine. Opening drive touchdown, and it seemed that all the momentum was for Southern Miss, and that Rice was never really able to gain that momentum until the third quarter.
Yeah, you're right about that, and he really only had that one mistake in the third quarter. I told you, you mentioned Vince Young in the Rose Bowl. Kind of reminded me of Reggie Bush in that Rose Bowl, where he kind of did the pitch back, and it didn't work, and Texas got the recovery.
I feel like we're having a lot of references to the Rose Bowl in this Mobile game.
I know, I mean, people do say that the LendingTree Bowl is the Rose Bowl of the South. People have even compared the two. But anyway, yeah, Trey Lowe, he came out humming. He really did in that first half. He played well, especially on the first drive. 2 big strikes to Jason Brownlee before the touchdown to Jacarius Caston. Really topped the drive off well, and he did well from there. He had that one mistake. I thought that at the end of the first half, they took him out in a goal-to-goal situation, put in the superback, and that's when they kicked a field goal from the 1-yard line, which was a little bit interesting. But after that, they were able to reclaim it after the third quarter sputterings, and really, Trey Lowe, really, for the end of the game, he kind of had to stay out of the way, and that's what he did. He gave it to Frank Gore Jr., and Frank Gore Jr. did Frank Gore Jr. things, and now that's not a slight against Trey Lowe. He did what he had to do, but he didn't have to be the hero, and I bet he would appreciate that more than anyone.
Yeah, it's about controlling the offense, and that's basically what Southern Miss has needed all season. And when the offense has worked the best is when they've able to have somebody at those controls, not trying to take the game over by themselves, but able just to control the offense, very similar to, Mac Jones or whatever in 2020 for Alabama. But, Austin, how would you grade Trey Lowe's performance tonight, especially considering what happened last year in this building?
Yes. Compared to last season from now, it's been a complete 180,
Right,
of course. If you know, last season, Southern Miss took on South Alabama here at Hancock Whitney Stadium where they would eventually lose. But Trey Lowe, just my grade of him, I would give him simply I don't want to, boost his grade too much, guys, but he did what needed to be done. He managed the clock and let Frank Gore cook. So in my grade, I would probably give him a C+. He didn't have one of the best.
Really?
Yeah, he didn't really have one of the best games in totality, but he made it the plays that needed to be made. He had a phenomenal throw to Brownlee. That pass to Ja'Karius Caston, man, that ball was on the money, guys. That was about a 40-yard pass. I can't remember the exact stats, but that set up a eventual 1-yard field goal, of course. But that was a phenomenal throw, and Southern Miss came with it tonight on offense. I just have to say that Frank Gore came with it specifically. The offensive line, they blocked like none other. The holes in the moves that Frank Gore put on, and that were just the lanes were just crazy. It was just, man. And you look at it, Jason Brownlee had another phenomenal night, 74 yards of receiving. Ja'Karius Caston had about over 90 yards receiving. So Trey Lowe did what needed to be done, but at the same time, he could have made some extra more throws to lead this offense a little bit more. But he didn't really have to make those throws. I think he did what needed to be done with the C+. That would be my grade of him.
I'm glad you're not my teacher because I would not be giving him a C+. I mean, man, I feel like I got to give him an A. I mean, I feel like he did exactly what. I mean, obviously the 2 turnovers and all that. Oh, I guess Frank fumbled, right? It wasn't him, but he had the one fumble, but. I think I got to give him an A. I think he did what he needed to tonight. He didn't force many throws. He took what was there. He rolled with the offense. If they would have lost, he wouldn't have been the reason they lost. So I think it's nothing short of an A. I think this whole performance by Southern Miss tonight is an A. And, I mean, yeah, and Frank Gore Jr., you can't even grade that because it was unbelievable. Jackson, how'd you grade Trey Lowe? Yeah, I mean, that's one of the teachers like, all right, just go ahead and go to graduate school or something in elementary. You can't even. But just talk about Trey Lowe's performance and then talk about the defense, man. I mean, I think like before we get to you, I think like sometimes, and I am not diminishing what Frank Gore Jr. did tonight, and no worries that we will never probably see that again on a football field with a Southern Miss uniform. That was unbelievable. But sometimes stuff like that kind of overshadows with the defense tonight. Dalen Gill, unbelievable night. You called it in the press conference. He turned into somebody who was like possessed out there, just talk about the defense, but also talk about this Trey Lowe debate.
Yeah, he was a man possessed. Quick about Trey Lowe, I'd probably give him a solid B. I think he did what he needed to. Nothing spectacular, I would say.
Yeah, tough grader.
Hey, a B, an 85. Get you on the vice president's list. They won a bowl game, but anyway, Dalen Gill and Frank Gore Jr. Not since Greg Jennings with a broken leg has 2 players put a team on their back like before. That's a reference for you guys, but yeah, Dalen Gill really played like a man possessed. The last 2 drives, he had 2.5 sacks. Kept getting to the quarterback and didn't let them have an inch. He really took over after the defense really struggled in the third quarter. That, along with offensive struggles, really allowed Rice to get back in the game and take the lead. But then when the game mattered most, we saw the Southern Miss defense do what they've done so many times before. That's smother opposing quarterbacks with that brutal pass rush, and that's exactly what they did. I don't have the exact stats, but they had most of their sacks in the fourth quarter. And on those last drives, Rice had to keep punting because they were in 4th and long because of all the tackles for loss and sacks. And, down a touchdown, down 2 touchdowns, you never want to punt in that situation. But the Southern Miss pass rush kept doing their thing to force Rice into those situations. They really put the exclamation point on this game. And Frank Gore Jr. could have ran for 500 yards, but if the defense didn't buckle down in the fourth quarter, it would not have mattered.
Yeah, so 550 total yards for Southern Miss's offense tonight, something that we really haven't seen all season. the defense allowed 425. So a good amount of yards allowed there. Coming into the game on the preview pod, we talked about how Rice's rushing defense might be susceptible to a potential breakout game for Frank Gore Jr. One of y'all predicted that in the bold predictions. I can't remember who did, but I will say, though, that one thing that's interesting, you talked about how you thought Brownlee was going to have a huge game. They talked about this in the press conference, how they were kind of double-teaming him, which allowed Frank Gore Jr. to have this big game. Austin, we've talked about it during the season. We've talked about how when the run game gets going, it opens up the passing game. Tonight seemed like almost an opposite of that, where the passing game wasn't working, right? It really wasn't working to the fullest extent. And the running game got going. So it's kind of like a reverse of that as the Southern Miss team leaves or whatever. That's the Sirens.
Yeah, and something I like to allude to that before I get to that point was Mike Bloomgren. He talked about before in the media day, he talked about he was having sleeping troubles and he would have slept a little better if Frank Gore Jr. wasn't playing for Southern Miss.
That's
and
the coach.
The Rice's head coach. And he talked about simply that matter and Frank Gore just to go off like he did. But it was interesting to see Frank Gore talked about it. They were double teaming Jason Brownlee, you know what I'm saying, because of the threat that he possessed on the offensive end. And you saw them get the ball to Brownlee still, and he made a phenomenal catch, especially right here on this end for the touchdown. I think that was in the third or fourth quarter. Can't remember exactly, but it was a huge touchdown that would tie the game or so. But just to add to that, Brownlee double team. Frank Gore holes were just open all night, and then he made the special thing about Frank Gore was he made the extra move and the extra cut, and he fought for those extra yards. That helped him to get to that last touchdown. Matter of fact, we thought he was down for a second, and he kept running and kept moving, but those holes were open, and a lot of it too was due to the passing game because of the deep threat that Jason Brownlee possessed, and Ja'Karius Caston also had a couple deep balls right there. So I think Rice was a little nervous right there and scared, and they came down. They had a second-string quarterback in for a little while because the first string went down. But the holes were open. The passing game was there when it needed to be, and that opened the holes for Frank Gore Jr. And Rice struggled. They struggled all year. I think they were in the top 40 of most allowed rushing yards in the for the FBS, and that was something that was huge, and it took effect tonight.
Yeah, it definitely did. Nothing short of amazing. When Will Hall when the game was over, they Gatorade dumped him on like the 40-yard line, and he was jumping in people's arms, and it really felt like when Southern Miss won the NCAA regional back in June, when the baseball team went and ran to the roost, and that's kind of what it felt like. It was almost that emotional just because of how big this win was. Like, it doesn't matter where it is, it doesn't matter the opponent, just to win a bowl game in Will Hall's second year, Jackson, and be able to go 7-6 and win it here in Mobile in front of the many Southern Miss fans who made the trip, and to be able to hoist that trophy on the other end there, and to be able to see a performance like this from Frank Gore Jr., it was almost like everything he said in the press conference that they've been building to this moment, and now that they've got it, but they still have so much more they still have a long way to go, but man, this was a step in the right direction.
I believe cathartic might be the word. Obviously, you said that they still have.
Saurus out tonight.
They still
have
have.
Video, the Saurus podcast.
Yes, the Saurus Rex. They still have a long way to go, but obviously this is a great moment for Will Hall in year two, and obviously he couldn't do it without a Herculean effort from Frank Gore Jr. and some other of his players.
Herculean?
I love that word, man. I love that word. Put the team on his back. But anyway, Jason Brownlee said post-game, we asked him, he's had a lot of wins here, a lot of seasons at Southern Miss. A lot of people point to the Tulane game, the Louisiana game this year. He said this was the best number one game that he's ever been a part of, because going out on top with a win for his illustrious career, that's a good one. And 71 freshmen and sophomores, that's a number that Will Hall always throws around when he's talking about the future of this program. And obviously, you've got some dogs who are leaving, but they're building that foundation. But here's the thing, 7-6 and a bowl win in year two, guess what? The expectations just got that much higher. I know Will Hall and company, they appreciate the challenge, and I have no doubts that they're going to do whatever they can to exceed those expectations in year three.
Yeah, I agree. And everything that happened this year, all the criticism, everything, I think, is all diminished tonight, because literally what more can a Southern Miss fan ask for than going to a bowl game, winning the bowl game, and go finishing this year above 500 after what we've seen the past 2 seasons of Southern Miss football. Nothing but a step in the right direction. I want to thank all of y'all for following along this season with us. It's been a pleasure. This, unfortunately, is my gentleman standing to my right and left last football game with the student Prince covering. So I want to personally thank y'all, just personally, just being with me and being able to cover games with me. It's been an honor to cover this season with y'all. Thank you so much for watching. We're missing Charlie and Nathan. They are both out tonight. Weren't able to make the trip, so props go out to them when they watch this. And so one last time for the 2022 season, that is Jackson Howell. That is Austin Lindsay. And I'm Dewey Mixon. Thanks so much for listening. And I will see you next year. These gentlemen, unfortunately, will not. But we'll see you next season at The Rock 2023. Thanks so much for watching.